The story of Africa in the 21st century is increasingly being defined by figures who defy convention, leaders who look at the world not as it is, but as it could be. Among them, Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso has emerged as one of the most surprising and uncompromising. Still young by the standards of global leadership, he has not shied away from bold experiments and unconventional projects that seek to redefine what development means for an African nation often relegated to the margins of global attention. One of the most remarkable examples of this approach is his initiative to construct bridges using old tires, an idea that at first sounds unusual, even eccentric, but which reveals layers of innovation, environmental consciousness, and revolutionary practicality once examined more deeply. In a continent where infrastructure gaps stifle economic progress and isolate communities, bridges are not mere structures of concrete and steel. They are lifelines that connect people, goods, and opportunities. Burkina Faso, like many of its neighbors, suffers from the absence of reliable road networks. Seasonal floods cut off villages, farmers are unable to bring produce to markets, and students miss school because rivers become impassable during heavy rains. Conventional bridges are expensive, require imported materials, and often involve foreign contractors who profit far more than the communities they claim to serve. It is in this context that Traoré's project carries revolutionary weight. By turning discarded tires, once considered useless waste, into building blocks of connectivity, he is rewriting the narrative of resource use, sustainability, and sovereignty. The concept is rooted in both necessity and vision. Burkina Faso imports thousands of vehicles each year, and with them come mountains of worn-out tires that pile up in landfills or are burned, releasing toxic fumes into the air. Environmental agencies have long warned that tires are among the most difficult forms of waste to manage, resistant to decay and hazardous when mishandled. Traoré's government looked at this problem not as a burden, but as an opportunity. What if these tires, symbols of consumption and waste, could be transformed into the foundations of infrastructure that binds the country together? What if every discarded tire became a stepping stone to resilience? Engineers working under the project explain that tires possess remarkable structural qualities. When compacted with sand, soil, or concrete, they form blocks that are extraordinarily resistant to pressure and impact. In earthquake-prone regions around the world, similar methods have been used in small-scale housing, but rarely in large infrastructure projects. By scaling the idea to bridges, Traoré is testing a daring hypothesis: that modern engineering does not always require imported cement or high-cost steel, but can harness what is already available, lying neglected in junkyards and roadside dumps. The early prototypes of these tire bridges were modest, footbridges spanning narrow rivers in rural villages. But their success quickly encouraged bolder applications. Farmers who once carried produce on their heads through treacherous currents now push carts across sturdy spans. Children who missed school during rainy seasons now cross safely every morning. What began as an experiment has evolved into a broader vision of national transformation. Villages celebrate the bridges not just as functional structures, but as symbols of pride. They are built not by foreign contractors, but by local workers trained in new skills, bringing employment and a sense of ownership to the communities. The environmental impact is equally significant. By recycling old tires on a massive scale, Burkina Faso is reducing pollution, cutting down on waste disposal problems, and turning a global challenge into a local solution. International environmental organizations have taken notice, praising the project as one of the most innovative examples of circular economy in practice. Where the world often lectures Africa about sustainability, here is an African leader pioneering a model that others may one day follow. Yet, as with many of Traoré's initiatives, the Tyre Bridge project is not without controversy. Critics question the durability of such structures over decades, particularly under the stress of heavy vehicles. Some argue that it is a stopgap measure, not a long-term replacement for traditional infrastructure. Others, particularly outside the continent, dismiss it as symbolic rather than substantive, another populist gesture designed to capture headlines rather than solve systemic problems. But such critiques often miss the deeper point. Traoré's strategy is not about replacing concrete bridges entirely, but about demonstrating that alternatives exist, that innovation can be locally driven, and that sovereignty means finding one's own answers instead of waiting for handouts or loans from global institutions. The political symbolism cannot be ignored. In a time when Burkina Faso is redefining its place in the world, distancing itself from Western tutelage and seeking alliances with other emerging powers, the Tyre bridges serve as a metaphor for self-reliance. Every bridge built with old tires is also a bridge away from dependency, a bridge that connects past struggles with future aspirations. It is a statement to the people that leadership is not about speeches in distant capitals, but about tangible change in everyday life, about whether a child can reach school safely or a farmer can feed his family through market access. The bridges have also become a point of continental inspiration. Delegations from neighboring countries have traveled to Burkina Faso to study the designs, explore partnerships, and consider replication. In regions where budget constraints cripple development, the idea of transforming waste into opportunity resonates strongly. The African Union has quietly begun to discuss how such grassroots innovation could feed into continental development strategies, moving beyond reliance on Western aid packages that often come with strings attached. At the same time, the project has stirred unease in circles that profit from Africa's infrastructural dependency. Multinational construction firms, accustomed to lucrative contracts funded by international loans, view such low-cost, local alternatives as a threat to business models that keep African nations indebted and dependent. For them, a bridge made of tires is not just a technical oddity. It is a challenge to the financial structures that have long governed Africa's development trajectory. By embracing tires over imported steel, Traoré is not merely building roads, he is disrupting a global order. On the ground, the stories that emerge are deeply human. In one village, elders recount how every rainy season used to isolate them for weeks, with the sick unable to reach hospitals and families cut off from essential supplies. Now, thanks to the Tyre bridge, the community remains connected year-round. In another region, women's cooperatives have expanded trade across rivers, doubling their income and investing in education for their children. These testimonies reveal that the project is not just about infrastructure. It is about dignity, possibility, and the quiet revolution of daily life. As the initiative scales up, new challenges arise. Engineers must ensure safety standards that match or exceed international benchmarks, particularly as larger bridges for vehicles are envisioned. Training programs must expand to equip more local workers with the skills to design, build, and maintain these structures. Research institutions are being engaged to study long-term durability, climate resilience, and innovative design improvements. The government, for its part, is preparing regulations to standardize tire collection, prevent illegal dumping, and integrate recycling into national policy. Beyond the technical and environmental dimensions, the Tyre Bridge project is shaping the narrative of what leadership means in Africa today. Traoré is presenting himself not as a mere manager of state affairs, but as a visionary willing to embrace risk, experiment with unconventional ideas, and prioritize the empowerment of ordinary people. In doing so, he taps into a broader longing among Africans for leaders who are not beholden to foreign interests, but grounded in the realities and aspirations of their own. Citizens, the symbolism of tires, objects, once discarded, overlooked, and written off, mirrors the symbolism of Africa itself in the eyes of the world. For centuries, the continent was treated as expendable, its resources extracted, its people marginalized. Now, in turning waste into bridges, Traoré is offering a metaphor for Africa's own transformation. What the world disregards, Africa can reclaim, repurpose, and elevate into a foundation for the future. In that sense, every Tyre bridge is also a statement of defiance and hope, an assertion that African solutions to African problems need not wait for external validation. the international reaction to the project has been divided. Some Western commentators patronizingly describe it as resourceful but primitive, betraying a mindset that still underestimates African ingenuity. Others, particularly in the Global South, hail it as an example of the creativity that emerges when necessity meets determination. Development experts in Asia and Latin America are already studying the Burkina Faso model, considering whether similar projects could address their own rural infrastructure challenges. The possibility that Africa could become a source of inspiration rather than merely a recipient of aid is part of the quiet revolution unfolding in real time. As Burkina Faso continues to build bridges of tyres, it also builds bridges of trust between leadership and the people, between innovation and tradition, between the burdens of the past and the possibilities of the future. For Traore, the project is more than a technical achievement. It is a symbol of his vision for a nation that refuses to be defined by limitations, a people that refuses to be dismissed, and a continent that insists on charting its own course. The world may still debate the technical merits and long-term viability of Tyre bridges, but for the farmers who now reach markets, the children who now cross safely to schools, and the communities that no longer face isolation during floods, the impact is already real, already transformative. This is the measure of leadership that resonates most deeply, not the applause of foreign dignitaries, but the gratitude of ordinary citizens whose lives have been changed. And in this measure, Ibrahim Traoré's experiment with old tyres stands as one of the most quietly revolutionary projects of our time.